Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Musician's Mentor Podcast. I am your host, Travis Mark, and today I'm pleased to announce that my guest is none other than the one and only Mr. Brian Brignac. Brian is a drummer / engineer / producer here in Louisiana and has had major career success with credits to his name that include Domino, Jimmy Buffett, Wayne Toops, Sonny Landreth, Cameron Dupuis and the Cajun Troubadours, and many, many others. He also owns Brignac Lane Studios out in the country, which is a beautiful facility that I've been lucky enough to record at with the Daywalkers. Just a wonderful, wonderful place. Brian's the man, and I'm going to let him basically show why during the course of this interview. We talk about the usual musician life kind of stories. But before we get started, please let me remind you that if you haven't done so already, please leave us a rating or review, or simply share this podcast with your family, friends, or any like-minded individuals. It's extremely helpful, and I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you. For now, though, ladies and gentlemen, may I introduce to you the one, the only, Mr. Brian Brignac. Alrighty, Brian Brignac. How you doing, man? It's so good to have you here. Thank you for joining me on the Musician's Mentor Podcast. I've got a whole bunch of stuff prepared. We're going to talk about you as a drummer / musician. We're going to talk about you as a producer / studio owner. But what I like to do with every guest is start in the same way that I start every episode, and that is to ask you as the guest to please introduce yourself, Brian Brignac, to my listeners. Let them know who you are, some of the things you've done, some of the things you may be up to now, just so they get a bit of an idea of where you're coming from during the course of this interview.
Well, hello. My name is Brian Brignac. I am from Gonzales, Louisiana, which is about 60 miles west-northwest of New Orleans. And I started playing drums as a little kid. My daddy had a drum set in the house. And then when I was about 15, I started playing, I guess, for what you call professionally, where I started making money, you know. And when I was 22, I went on the road with a guy named Wayne Toops and playing drums. And then when I was about in my late 20s, I bought a digital recorder, and that kind of started my recording career. And then fast forward another 15 years later, I built a recording studio, and I've been doing that for about 8 years now. And I still travel and play music, and just rolling on, you know, life's good.
Amazing, dude. And, we had a brief chat yesterday regarding travel and just some musician life. We're going to get into some of that. Before we do, though, let me backtrack a little. Let's talk about you as a drummer first. Obviously, you've got quite a lot of credits to your name. I mean, just some of them include Domino, Jimmy Buffett, Wayne Toops, Sonny Landreth. There's a host of them. I'll put them all in the show notes as usual. Let's talk about what initially attracted you to the drums. Obviously, you said your dad had a drum kit at the house. So was it just a matter of you would sit there and play drums, or did you see something or hear something that made you kind of go, whoa, I gotta do this?
Well, I think it was that I have a lot of music in both sides of my family. On my dad's side, pretty sure it was my grandfather's grandfather. So my great-great-grandpa, he played clarinet with Louis Prima from New Orleans. And
So cool.
Carnegie Hall in New York City and all that. I think it was in the 1920s. And then on my mom's side of the family, I remember I think I was 15, and I counted there were 10 drummers on my mom's side. That's just drummers. There's singers, every bass player, guitar, whatever. My mama's uncle, so my great uncle, Steve Babin, from what I hear, he was one of the first to add ninths and 11ths and 13ths to chords, like instead of just playing a major chord, you know, bar chords.
Yeah.
He was one of the first people around this area to do that. So anyway, I have it a lot in my family. And so my dad bought me back then, the little kid drum sets were like paper. The heads were paper. Well, he said he bought 2 of them when I was 3. and I busted them in the first day, each one. So after that, he was like, I'm not doing that anymore. So then he started letting me play his drum set, which is, I still have it. It's actually his, but my son's doing the same thing to me, he's stealing all my stuff. But anyway, it's an old Rogers drum kit from the 60s. And well, you've been to the studio, so you've seen the yeah.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I started playing those, and I can remember it's a 20-inch bass drum. I can remember I couldn't reach the floor, so I would grab the beater with my toes and push it against the head, which I didn't have any power, but that's all I could do. So I can remember playing that young. So I don't know. It's just, I think it was in me, and then I started playing. I can remember being really young, just just practicing whatever it was. My dad, he would always row every 2 bars and row. So anyway, it was just always in me and around me, and so I just did it. My son's doing the same thing. He's playing, and
it's amazing, dude. And it's so funny to think that there were like 10 drummers just on your mom's side, because if you think about, I'm sure this happens across the board with most instrumentalists, but what I've learned as a drummer over the years is just how people always seem to be looking for a drummer. Oh man, you know a drummer? Hey, I need a drummer. Oh dude, can you do my gig? So could you imagine if your mom set up an agency back in the day, she would have, your family would have all the drum work across the state. It would be amazing.
right.
Anyway, listen, having chosen the same kind of career path myself, I know that obviously mentioning credits like the ones from the previous question, that doesn't just come to you. It comes through years of grinding, networking, hard work, doing a lot of gigs that maybe weren't always the best types of gigs. What, in your opinion, or what advice could you potentially offer listeners looking to kind of become professionals within the industry, whether they're drummers or guitarists, musicians? Let's put it across the board. What advice could you potentially offer them on trying to get out there more, especially nowadays? Like we've got so many things that have changed. It used to be, hey, you went to a jam session and you met a couple people, or hey, you did a gig, and if you did well at that gig, sometimes you'd get another gig. I feel like that stuff still exists, obviously, but so much has changed in addition to that. So could you potentially offer any tips or opinions on how you would get out now?
First and foremost, you have to be good, which means you have to practice. Not only do you have to have a talent, I think that is God-given, but just because you have a God-given talent doesn't mean, boom, you're going to take over the world, or you're going to achieve your dreams. So you have to practice. I tell my son every day, he was just playing a game. I said, it's fun playing that game, but boy, just think if you were practicing that piano, maybe you'd learn a harmonic minor scale from F sharp, maybe, and then you could do one from G,
Yeah.
You're not going to learn to do it in the game. So anyway, you have to practice. Now that the world's so different, I'm 53, and when I was young, we could play 5 nights a week in this area and make a good living with a 5-piece band. And now that kind of doesn't exist anymore. Now you can play 5 nights a week if you are a single or part of a duo. That world of big bands playing 5 nights a week in a local area, that's very hard unless you're in a city like New Orleans, or a very touristy city, Nashville, Austin, one of those kind of things. So, first of all, you have to be good, and second of all, I guess you have to put yourself. I think if you're good enough, then things will lead to get you out. If you're a great musician, somebody's going to find out about you. And I keep bringing up my son because he's talented and he's putting in some work. And so already people are finding out that he can play, and he's young. He's only 11. But, I think in a couple of years, he's going to be able to play with bands on a couple of different instruments because people have found out that he can play.
Yeah.
Now, there's a whole social media aspect that personally I have not pursued, but I guess that's because I was already sort of out there before all that came about. So, nowadays you see like the drummer, I forgot what country he's from, Serbia, I think. He's like the most famous cat, does he's really fat. You know who I'm talking about.
I know exactly who you're talking about. Yeah.
He's like the most famous cat in the world because he's got this YouTube channel and he's great. And he puts together these great videos and it's awesome playing. And so I think, that's part of it today where you probably have to do some of that. But first and foremost, you have to be good. If you're great, people are going to find out about you. And I think you'll get to gigging, somebody will hire you. Somebody needs you. Dave Weckl said, I went to one of his clinics years ago. You know who Dave Weckl is?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And he said, how he said that? He said, he made us raise our hands. And he said, who out there practices, raise your hand every day? And so, so many of us raised our hands. And he said, let me tell you something. You cannot practice enough. He said, because somebody is. And if you want the gig, you better be practicing or they're going to get it, not you. And he said, you also can't be, one of the greatest players and stuck in your closet. It's not going to happen because people are going to know, they're going to find out and they need you. They're going to hire you. Yeah. So just make sure you're good at your craft,
It's great advice, man. It's a conversation slightly spun a few different ways, but it's a conversation I've had a lot. And it's like, it's interesting how when you think about being a musician, how there's levels, and people will refer to young musicians and think that that's about age. It's not. It's about the mindset you have as a musician and at what point you're thinking about things. And dude, even me at my point, I've been playing a long time. I still practice every day. I've got this drum kit behind me. I was on it the hour before we spoke. It's like every day. It's like, and it's a tough thing because I think where things are now, and I'm stereotyping, but I think because it's so easy to get such instant gratification, I think, I don't know, trying to create independence in a certain ostinato pattern or whatever it is you're playing, there's things that take repetitive motions. And I think when I look at some young players now, there's some incredible players. And obviously, even on like YouTube and stuff like that, there are guys who just make my jaw drop. But I think a lot of people just think, oh, I'm hypothetically going to buy a drum kit and play like John Bonham tomorrow. That's not how it works,
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, let's move on. Let's talk about traveling. I want to talk about traveling as a musician. I know that, like me and many others, you've had some issues traveling, more recently with some flight connections and just travel logistics. So, a couple things. One, what are the hardest parts about being a traveling musician for you? Two, have you got any potential advice that might make traveling easier overall for musicians who are touring or traveling a lot? Like little things you've learned along the way. Hypothetically, when I was speaking to Rich Redmond a few months ago, he was talking about how he's kind of come up with this system where he puts a snare drum, a bass drum pedal, a cymbal, and something else all in one case. So he's only got to carry the one case. Like, I'm not necessarily saying just stuff like that, but those kinds of things. Do you do anything for your eating that makes it easier for you? Do you do anything for your sleeping that makes it easier for you? Your gear, just your overall travel. What do you do?
That brings about a lot of thoughts.
We have time, so knock them out.
Yeah. Okay, so traveling. It's a blessing and a curse, just like any job. People ask me about being a musician, and I say it's just like any other job. It has positives and negatives. So the negatives about traveling for me are basically airports and delays and canceled flights. I just experienced that. We were talking about that yesterday. Actually, I experienced it twice in the last 9 days. It took 38 hours to go to Romania because the first plane had to pull over and put gas in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, instead of going straight to Chicago. Then we missed the flight, blah, blah, blah. So, it makes for some long days. On the way home, same thing, going from Chicago to Houston. Because of weather, we couldn't get in. So all of a sudden, we're in San Antonio fueling up. By the time we finished all that, the flights to Baton Rouge or New Orleans were all gone. So I had to sleep in Houston. So, it can be, that's a negative. Probably a bigger negative than that for me is, I have young children. So being away from them is, that's tough.
Yeah.
Well, and let me add another negative. When you get home, your yard, the grass is like a foot and a half, which if you could see outside, the grass is a foot and a half tall. The weeds are growing over, it's like the jungle's growing and you're behind. And so, that's another thing. But anyway, the positive is I love seeing the world, to see and meet other people with other cultures. And I mean, it's for me, it's really gratifying. And, when those plane rides and those delays and all that happens, you think, oh man, I'm not gonna keep doing this because this kind of for the birds. But then you go and you experience another culture and you meet all these great people from around the world and you have friends and then you go, you know what? It was really worth it. For me, it is.
Yeah.
And I've been traveling for 31 years, I guess. Um, so the second part of the question, what makes traveling easier and how I travel. So I used to bring like symbol bags through the airport when I was young. Well, after you do that a few times and your shoulder aches for the next 3 days, I stopped doing that. So now I usually bring just one symbol that I can make into a stack because you don't always get the best cymbals.
Yeah.
And the drums for me, I can usually tune a drum, and I can figure it out, and I can make them sound to where we can get the gig done, and everybody's happy. So I just bring a cymbal. I bring it's not big; it's only like a 12-inch, but I stack it. It actually has a crack in it, so I don't have to worry about the airlines breaking it because that's another story. Which
Yeah.
it, uh, a lot of things from my drum machines been broke to cymbals to they have the they'll slit your cymbal bag. I guess they want to see if there's drugs in it. So they'll take a brand new cymbal bag. They've done it to at least 3 of my brand new bags, and they'll just take a knife and slice through it. I guess I'm thinking like y'all don't have any dogs around here, but
Yeah.
everybody else through it. So anyway, my cymbal's broke, so they can't break it anymore. But it actually works good because I can stack it on even a cymbal that's not good at all, and I get a good short sound. And usually you'll get 1 or 2 cymbals that are really good. I do have a dream endorsement, and whenever they're there, that works great. But they can't always be in every part of the world. So.
Of course.
Okay, so then I put my stick bag in my suitcase with the cymbal in a case, and then I have what I call my trinket bag or my trinket case, and it has like a tambourine. I play with Sonny Landreth a lot on the road, and we have been doing an acoustic set, and so I play a cajon. And a friend of mine got me from he's from Brazil, I think, and he got me playing the cajon with a brush in my right hand, and he takes uh, a bass drum pedal, and he told me, he said, turn it around. He said, put some foam on it, and so you actually play it backwards. So
Oh,
I have a
cool.
bass in my right hand, my kick drum on my right foot, and then I play my left hand as naturally. And then I put some trinkets on my left foot, which is like I have I don't know what they're even called, but I call them schlackles.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like some those little wooden. I don't know. I don't know the name of them. It's a Latin instrument, but anyway, they clip around your leg and they make a, you know.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And I have a tambourine. I have some little castanets that I'll click on my feet, and so I can do something with my left foot, which is just basically add to the backbeat.
Awesome.
So I put all the trinkets in the suitcase with the pedal, and I have a little metal stand that I could put my phone on because I use my phone as a click with Sonny. And so that all fits in my suitcase. It's a big Samsonite, and that works. And it's under 50 pounds.
Amazing.
Yeah. So I've been doing the gig for probably 6-7 years now. Other gigs that I'll go on the road with, I play with Boogie, Jonathan Boogie Long, and we travel. And for that, I just usually bring a stick bag.
Yeah. I like the idea of the stacking cymbal. That's quite cool.
Yeah, it gives you a short sound. Usually when you go somewhere, you'll have, even if it's a house kit you're playing somewhere, you don't, the house gigs are usually a little harder to get, all great stuff because people are playing on their break and it's that kind of stuff. But I usually get one or two good cymbals. So the stack will give me a short sound. I'm a fan of having different, if I can get a clean ride, a washy ride crash, I should say a clean ride and a good crash off of that, a washy ride and a good crash off of that, and then some kind of shorter sound, then to me, I got three nice distinct things, and that's all I need and get through it. So the little crack cymbal allows me to do that.
That's awesome.
Okay, so let me expand on the travel thing when it comes back to planes and traveling. So I just went to Romania. I had 3 pillows in my bag. I had 2 neck pillows. One I put inside my book sack. I put one inside it. I clipped one to the top of it. But then my sister also gave me some kind of traveling pillow that's becomes like air packed, and then you open it up and it expands, blah, blah, blah. So I had those 3, and then the airlines, they give you, and nowadays they give you like it's this little bitty old pillow. Well, when you're traveling in a plane for 9 hours, I'm small, and so there's always a gap between my back and the back of the seat. So that allows me to put a couple of those back there. So I got a little pressure, can lean against. Then I have something for my head, because in 9 hours, you want to be as comfortable as you could be, because it can be torturous. If you're really sleepy and you can't go to sleep, you're not comfortable. You wake up, you're trying to get sideways in the seat. You got somebody next to you. You got somebody next to you. It's like, oh my Lord, have mercy. That's a travel tip. And also in a van, I'll have the couple pillows. Same thing. You're riding 4 hours in a van somewhere. That really helps. Now, if you're on a bus, that's usually, you can take your pillow out your bunk if you want to go sit on a couch and you need a little back support. But
yeah, the back support thing is interesting because drums are physically demanding already. Then you add cajon and you're kind of bending over like that. You need to get that back rested because, oh man, that's a killer,
Oh, yeah.
I know you started with the Romania travel story, but in addition to that, have you got any like real travel horror stories?
Let me think about that for a second. Oh, yes. That brings me back 30 years ago. And, at one point on some tours, we get in a bus and go all over the place, and that was great. But as a non-smoker back then, they were smoking Marlboro Reds, which is the non-filtered as far as I understand. And almost, you got 6 people smoking, and then you have a couple that are not. And so for the non-smokers, it's like, whoa. Well, so check this out. Imagine being in a Suburban where the 2 people in the front are smoking. Then there's 2 or 3 of us in the middle seat. And then there's 3 people in the back seat. And so 2 people in the front are all smoking. The 3 people in the back are all smoking Marlboro Reds. The windows are up. I just remember being, putting a pillow over my head and just going, Lord, let me survive. Let me survive. And I couldn't breathe, and it's like, man, that's some, and then you're going from South Louisiana to Maine.
Dude.
Oh my God, please let me survive this, So yeah, that's a horror story.
That is a horror story.
Yeah, that doesn't really happen anymore because the world's a little different. People don't use smoke in the vehicles like they used to.
Yeah. I even remember when all the venues still allowed smoking. It's like,
I don't.
as a non-smoker, and listen, if you choose to smoke, that's on you, like no issue, like whatever. But as a non-smoker, I remember like with certain bands that I was doing these runs and stuff with, and you'd get home and after however many weeks it had been, and everything just smelled like smoke. It took months to
Oh,
get the gear to stop smelling like smoke, or even on just one nighters, like you'd go home
yeah.
and you'd get in the shower and it smelled like you were using smoke body wash because everything that hit you was just smoke. I hated it.
Oh,
Anyway,
yeah. You play. I remember this one club around here. It just had, for whatever reason, the smoke was like that. The smell wasn't like intensified. So the next day, you can go bathe. You get up the next morning, you smell your clothes wherever they were, either on the floor in your room or in the bathroom, wherever they were, you smell them. Then you go and just get your car to go to the store, and you're like, oh my God, the gear's still in there. It reeks. It's like, yeah.
yeah,
Uh,
that sucks, man.
I'm glad we survived those days.
Me too. Me too. Let's switch gears and start talking about Brignac Lane Studios. We started at the top of the episode by saying that you had built a studio and you worked as that vocation for a bit too. Let's talk about what made you start the studio back in 2016. And I know that you said that you had originally had a digital recorder. So was that the motivation into eventually expanding into a whole studio, or what was?
uh, the long story of how the studio came about was when I was younger. I guess I started recording when I was about 16, was the first record I ever played on. And then I guess it gradually progressed. And so by the time I got to my late 20s, well, every time that I would play in the studio, it was like the next gig was the best gig of my life. And I always attributed it to, well, when you in the studio, you're studying, you're like, and then you're under a big microscope. So you're like, you just really studying and you just focused on how good your playing is. So then a friend of mine, Len Boudreau, he was working at a music store. He's a fellow drummer, still does it. And he was working at a music store, and we were roommates at the time, and he bought this little Korg digital recorder, and he came home and we started recording. And it was at that moment that I realized that, okay, so uh, you can I realized I got better every time I recorded because of the focusing. So then when he bought this machine, I realized, wow, it's in my financial grasp to go get one of these things. And so I could teach myself. Like, it's clean enough where I could record myself playing something, and I'm going to be able to learn from that. And so that's what I did. I bought a Korg D1600, I think it was called. And actually, the guy you play with, Jansen,
Yeah.
I was playing with him back in the day, and it was the first thing that I ever recorded.
Amazing.
Yeah, sure was. And I was also playing with another band at that point, and I recorded them. And so that was my first dive into, okay, I'm recording my own bands, and just started learning. But it's weird because back in the day, you didn't just grab a selection and move it or copy it and paste it. You had to look at numbers and go, okay, I want to move it from 0.358978 whatever to 0.5795342.
Amazing.
And you had to do it like that. So it was weird. But the other side of that, it really taught me from a basic, point of view how to do those kind of things. So, and anyway, so I get that machine, then I get a Roland 2480, and then I get a what was it called? The Pro Tools, the first version, a 001,
Okay.
then a 002, then a 003, and now I have an HDX rig. So it just gradually, and then I kept recording bands here and there, and I had gotten married, and I was in my house, and before I had kids, I'd use one of the bedrooms as a little studio, and but I'd have to record bands when my wife was at work. Be like, okay, get here by 10, but we got to be done for 4:30 because you get home, and of course, she wouldn't want to hear all that. So it was like that, and then I had enough property where I'd always envisioned putting a studio in the back corner of my property. I had the property for about 20 years, thanks to my father. And he gave us all land. He was so smart. He bought family land. So I live here with all my family. And anyway, so for about 20 years, I knew I was going to do it. And I did it. Finally built a little studio in the back. And I've been there for about 8 years. And life's good.
And it's amazing. Like the vibe at that studio is amazing. I don't care what anybody says. I've been to many, many studios. Dude, there was some kind of magic in that room. I don't know if it's just the fact where you had the drums set up or what, but everything sounded great. Everything was great. There's snare drums everywhere. It's like a drummer's heaven. It's wonderful. Tell me, did you kind of like learn all the engineering side yourself as you were going along the years? Or was that something that you kind of really had to nail down in the same way as a drummer? Like, did you have to sit back and practice certain things to get good at it? Or did you learn along the way by being in studio and recording these other bands?
I would say both. Just going from one type of recording device to the next. You learn whatever you were working on. And then once I got to Pro Tools, I was the guy in whatever band I was in. If we were recording somewhere, when everybody else said, "Hey man, I'm going to get some lunch," I'd say, "No, I'm going to stay here and watch." And then when the engineer would do something and I would understand what he did, I would just say, "Hey man, how you did that?" And he said, "Well, I press this and press this." I said, "Okay, cool." And then that just happened. I had a few people I talked to. I can't remember his last name, but I actually talked to him yesterday for the first time in 14 years. He's a great engineer. His name is Dave. His last name starts with a B. And we worked at County Q together in a studio in Nashville. And that was one example where I just watched him and saw the things he did. David Huff, who had a studio or still does, I'm sure his son has it now, outside of Jackson, Mississippi, he had a great studio. And I remember asking him a bunch of questions. But the person most important that has been the biggest influence is Tony Daigle. And we've been friends. I first recorded with him when I was 18 years old. He's a great engineer. He's just accomplished. He's got like 7 Grammys, like 30 nominations or something. And he's just a big guy in the engineering world down here in Louisiana. And he's taught me more than anything because I went to him when the bands that I was making records with, I would go to him to mix it. And then we wind up re-recording a lot of stuff. And so I would just bug him and ask him tons of questions. And he always was super kind and went out his way. In fact, I just did it about an hour ago. I was cleaning something in the console and I forgot to put something back. So in the EQ section, and I called him and I said, "Hey man, can I leave this like this with the power on, or is it going to mess anything up?" Because I'm really not a gearhead. I'm a drummer at heart, and it just morphed in the. I was interested in the recording process, but anyway, so an hour ago he's doing the same thing. So Tony Daigle, he's been a great help, and then also you have to spend a lot of time by yourself, and he's been pretty hardcore with me a couple of times. He's like, "Hey man, there's YouTube. You can go look it up, And I just, okay. Right. Sorry, But not only for me, he's done that for so many people. I hear him answering the phone all the time when people are asking questions. But so you got to do both. You got to spend tons of time on your own, and then hopefully you get help from kind people along the way that want to help you out. Teach you things and help you when you get stuck.
Yeah, very true. The studio has obviously done very well. I mean, you've had numerous Grammy nominations. You've played on albums that have won Grammys. Talk to me about the ups and downs of running a studio.
Well, the positive side is you get to make great music. A lot of the people that come in, I know already. Some people don't. Then you meet them and you make great new friends, One just called me. I met him a couple of weeks ago. He came in. We did some great work. It was a lifelong dream of his he's a school teacher. But anyway, so you meet new people on the way. And the most important thing is you get to make music. It's not like a gig. It lasts forever.
Yeah.
I really like that part about it. And I really do love the recording process, and the way that the technology allows you to manipulate things now. I would love to sort of be back in the days where, somebody rented out the studio for a month or two or a year, and they just came live here, and we took our time, and we just, okay, well, try another mic, move it here, move it there, try another amp, try another guitar. But in today's world, those budgets don't exist a lot, and so everybody's in a hurry, and so you don't get to do as much of that. But the technology allows you to take records and sort of bypass a lot of that by somebody sitting back there and making somebody sound and play better using the technology. And I think that's just the world we live in. So the negatives would be, I don't know, there's not many negatives for me. What comes to mind is I'm in a small studio, and so I'm kind of everything. When the bank asks me, "What do you do?" I'm like, "Well, everything. I own it. I'm the janitor. I'm the maid. I cut the grass." You know what I mean? It's like, so, there's a lot of work. Always when the ladies come over to play or sing, you got to really go in the bathroom and make sure, okay, is this is this cool for them? Because the dudes are like, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
They can go outside if they want. But so there's a lot of upkeep to keep track of. And I don't know, man, there's not really many negatives for me. It's I love playing out, but man, making a record is my favorite, and always has been my favorite, which I guess is how I morphed to do it, even though it was never a life plan, never a goal. It just sort of happened for me.
Yeah.
So I think I'll be in the next few minutes, I'll tell you.
Of course. And it's funny. I'm gonna just segue a little bit here from if you've got ladies coming over, you got to make sure that bathroom is clean kind of thing, because I've worked at a few studios over the years, and this is a true story. I'm not going to mention the artist's name because she actually has a name, and I don't want to misquote in any way. But I was working at quite a prominent studio a few years ago, and this artist came to me. We were busy packing up from the session for the day, and we were just kind of, shooting the shit a little bit, talking. And she said, "Man, I love coming to this studio." And I was like, "Oh, that's great. Yeah, it's a good studio kind of thing." And she said to me, "Plus, the bathrooms are always clean." Now, I swear to God, she said that to me. And it's like, it's funny because this person, at least of stature, I would imagine she could go anywhere she wants. So the fact that she would choose your studio based on the fact that the bathroom is clean doesn't seem like a big deal, but it's such a big deal. And so for people who are trying to run studios or businesses or whatever, little details like that are more important than we even realize. It's kind of crazy,
Definitely.
Anyway, as a caveat to the previous question, and I know you said you're not a gearhead, but if you had to only use or could only save in a worst case situation one piece of gear from your studio, what would it be? And after that, I've got one last studio question for you as well, please.
Well, that would be my API 1608 console.
It's beautiful.
It really is. And I'd like to thank Mr. Larry Troper for giving me an unbelievable deal on that I couldn't pass up. He's a great fan of Sonny Landreth, who I play with, and I got to know him over the years. And anyway, there's been a couple people who have really blessed me in my life. He was one, and then Todd Viator was another guy who helped invest in my studio because he believed in me, and I'll always be grateful for those two guys.
That's amazing, man. If you could offer tips to any budding studio enthusiasts thinking about potentially trying to put money into starting a studio or starting a business like a studio, what would you advise?
Whatever the occasion, effortless elegance is right this way. Because Hilton brings you new ways to stay courtesy of the Nomad London. And it doesn't stop at award-winning dining in a space draped in velvet and illuminated by vintage chandeliers. No, this day goes beyond with unparalleled personalized service and attentive hospitality. Oh, and did we mention the Nomad London can be booked using your Hilton Honors points at Hilton.com? Hilton, for this day.
I guess it would depend on what level they're trying to run a studio at. You know, I mean, is it just going to be sort of themselves and their own music? You know, what's the budget? How much money do they have to spend on a studio? There's a lot of gear nowadays, you know. So, in my buddy Tony Daigle's words, when I would call him back in the day, and I'd say, "Hey, man, what mic should I put on this?" He's like, "Just put a 58 on it. Put a 57 on it." He said, "Man, you know how many great records were made with 57s, 58s?" And so, you know, the point is, I don't think nowadays you have to have the best of the best and all kind of gear to make a great record. You know, you need good players.
Yeah.
And a good work ethic, and just in a sense of, hey, when is it ready for the world? It's, you know, you got to get it to a point where, hey, man, you know, you want to compete with Sting and Vince Gill and Bruno Mars and whoever else. You know, you can't. They're not half-assing anything. You know.
Yeah.
So it's like, so you know, I guess it really it depends on how much money you have or how much money is available. You know, of course, who doesn't want the big studio with the most gear? And then gear never stops.
Nope.
I don't think it really matters how big a studio you have. You can have the biggest world class. There's still more 20,000 Telefunken mics you can get. There's still, you can add on to your console with another bucket. I mean, it just never ends. So I would just say, figure out at what level you want to go to and just start. Just get a piece of gear. You know, a good mic, a good preamp, a good EQ, and a good DAW, and start there.
Yeah.
You know, you need to record drums, which so you'll need a minimum of 4. That's just minimum. But then it goes from there. You know, are you recording drums at one time? So you could probably get away with 8, or maybe, you know, preferably 12 or so. Have 12 channels or 16 channels. You could do drums and bass and a guitar and maybe keys, which is how most people start. That's how I started with the Pro Tools. You could get 16 in, and you could get 2 extra through the spitter, I think it was. But anyway, so it just depends on what you need to do. If you're a guitar player and the most channels you would need to record is 2 at one time, or just get something that has a couple channels or 4 channels, and keep your microphone in one channel and your guitar in another. Another's like stereo, or you could have 3 guitar mics and have your vocal mic in one. Boom, you got 4 channels. You got all you need, and you can start recording. Bass player comes over after, well, just stick him in a channel. Pull your guitar out, stick him in a channel. So you can, you know, you don't have to have that much to start out with. And if you want to record a whole band at one time, then 24 tracks is great. You can do it. But you know, not everybody has that ability. If not, you can. I mean, the Beatles did it with 4. You know, just bounce.
Right.
And, you know, you got a record.
Exactly. Brian, what has been the hardest part about being a self-employed musician for you?
Well, you don't make the money unless you, you know, luck, or I think it's luck, and I think it's also your ability. You know, all that lines up, and next thing you know, you're working for whoever, Michael Jackson, Stevie Wonder, Garth Brooks, or whoever it is you want to work for. And then, you know, maybe you make a really nice living, or even better, you write a song that takes over the world, and then you're really set. For me, once I started traveling, it was probably being gone so much, you know. I've been through a couple of marriages, and being a road musician definitely does not help, you know. So, and what makes it hard to stay in your family life. You miss a lot of family functions and graduation. I mean, I did it this year. You know, my niece and my nephew both graduated college, and I'm on the road. You know, And then, when your wife wants to go to a wedding every other Friday when you're in your 20s, but you're on the road all the time, that eventually they kind of get tired of that.
Yeah.
So that's tough. And nowadays, when I'm on the road, miss my kids,
Of course. Of course.
Then the planes. The airport's in the planes. We're gonna stop seeing the airports and the planes.
So the bottom line is we need private airports, private planes.
Yeah.
That's the dream.
A bus whenever you can get on it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you had to start your career from scratch with the knowledge that you have now, how would you approach it?
I don't know. I don't know that I would do anything different. I really put in a lot of hours when I was young. I remember after high school, we had a practice room that was about a mile away from school. In between the school and my home, and I would go every day, and I would practice for at least an hour. I always thought, practice an hour a day when I was young in high school. And I remember putting my hands behind my back, and I'd go on my bass drums, or trying to do paradiddles or double strokes or something on my bass drums. I also remember years later when all my friends were going out to the clubs and they were all sitting in together. I did some of that, but I was home playing I had Sade and Anita Baker and Alita Adams and all those people in my ears, and Incognito and whatever it was, Toto, Michael Jackson, and I just play the records. And they were all out partying. And I don't think I would change that, that's all I could do. I wasn't in Nashville. I wasn't in LA or Austin or one of the big music places. I am from right outside of New Orleans, and that's a great benefit. And I think part of the benefit was just the music that I grew up listening to was Fats Domino and the Neville Brothers and just a ton of New Orleans, the old New Orleans music,
Yeah.
And listening to that. So, I don't know. I was lucky in the fact that I had, number one, my father provided so much gear. He was always into music. So we always had the best stereo equipment. For Christmas, he'd buy a set of speakers that he really wanted, but he'd give it to me and my brother. But then they were in the living room, it's like, all right, cool. Or, some big receiver. I mean, kind of stuff you can't hardly even buy anymore. But so we always had the best gear, and then because we were from New Orleans, we had great music to listen to. And you got to put it into practice, So I don't know how I would have did it any different.
Did you ever consider moving to a place like LA?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did. Once I was with Wayne Toops when I was 22, and then we went on the road, and so immediately I started meeting people. The first weekend, the first night I ever played with him, we met James Burton, Elvis's guitar player.
Super.
2 nights later, we're in Philadelphia playing the Jambalaya Jam Fest, and I'm 6 feet standing behind Willie Green and the Neville Brothers, and he looks like silk on drums, and I'm just going, oh my God, how cool was this? So, just from the beginning, traveling, meeting all those people, man, was just totally amazing.
That's amazing. Brian, I have one last question for you, man. What do you think has either been the best piece of advice you've ever received in regards to your music career, or if you can't think of something along those lines, what do you think has been something that you've learned along the way that could serve as good advice for an up-and-coming musician themselves? Or both?
Okay, well, I'm going to throw out one piece of advice as a drummer that Charlie Brent, who was an amazing guitarist, saxophone player, told me in a session one time, and it was about counting off a song. And we weren't using a click track on this session. And he goes, I don't know if I went to count it off or we were thinking about how to count it off. And he said, you know what? When you count off a song, you don't think about the beginning. You think about the outro. You think about the chorus. And if you're going to count out Brown Eyed Girl, don't think about dun, 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 dun. Don't think about that. You think about sha la 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 la, and then you count off the song. And that was one of the best pieces of advice that I've ever got. Okay. The other side, after lifelong, it's a life of doing this, I would say not only do you have to practice, but just as important as being a great musician, you have to be liked on the road. You have to be able to get along with people. You know, you have to be able to be with somebody or multiple people all day in a van, in the bus, in the plane, and then you got to go to sound check, then you got to do the gig, and you got to be with them after, then you got to travel to the hotel. So, you know, you can be a great player, but I know great players that have gotten fired from their gigs, not because they can't play, because people don't want to deal with them. And so the best piece of advice is practice, number one. Number two, get along with people. Be selfless. Practice the golden rule, which is doing to others as you'd have them doing to you. You know, just because it takes both to be a traveling musician. I don't think I'm the greatest drummer by any stretch. I think I'm a decent drummer. You know, obviously I've played good enough to travel for 30 years, but I think part of the reason that I've been able to play with people like Sonny and Boogie and Jimmy Buffett or whoever the rest of them was because, you know, when you're on the road, there's a time to be quiet. You know, we just talk all the time. You know, people don't want to sit in a van and somebody's yapping, taking everybody else's energy and never shuts up. And it's like, you know, you got to kind of just look at the big energy level in what's around you and go, okay, well, we've been yapping a little bit. Maybe I've been taking a little bit too much of this conversation. Maybe I'm just going to shut up for a little while, you know, and the cats that do it all the time, it's like, it's this unwritten or unsaid thing that just happens. It's amazing. You know, you be in a band, everybody's hooping high. Well, you know, we just got on the road. We're telling them, hey, what you been doing for a week or two, man? You know, what's been happening? Oh, yeah, like this, blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden, after about 15, 20 minutes, everybody just kind of goes, okay. All right. And then everybody just does their own thing. Something, you know, such and such is looking out the window, and then the rest of us are on our phones or whatever it is. And, you know, that's a big part of it.
Yeah.
You have to kind of know how to get along and just keep the peace all the time. You know, that's very important to be on the road. Probably really just about as much as your playing ability. Yeah. You have to be able to get along with people and not be a problem or not be a drain on anything, you know.
Yeah.
Help people, man. They need help. Go help them. No, don't sit there. They're all humping gear and you're sitting there going, oh, well, you know, no. I mean, I don't care who you are or what. I'm never going to not do that. You're not going to watch all your buddies. This weekend, the bass player and I, the guy that was bringing all the backline gear to this gig in New York, he hurt himself on the way. His poor thing, man. We all felt so bad. He couldn't hardly move. He never got out the van. Well, he did one time, and he had so much trouble getting back in that we just said, man, just sit there. And the bass player and I unloaded the lights, unloaded whatever gear we had to, the drums, you know, his rig, and we got it done.
Yeah.
And you know, do things like that. Don't just go, oh, well, I'm the drummer, I'm the guitar player. I'm not doing that. So, yeah.
Yeah.
And we're all the same, man. We're all just trying to make it in the world. So somebody's having a bad day, they can't do something, help them, man. You know?
Amazing, dude. Amazing. And I couldn't agree more. You know, it's everyone's just trying their best. So make life easy, you know. All right, man. That's amazing. Brian Brignac from Brignac Lane Studios and artists that are credited in the show notes because there's a billion of them. Dude, you're the man. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. I had a lot of fun. I hope you did too. And last thing before I let you go, is there any way that people can find out more about the studio? And if so, please tell them now.
You can call 225-933-2559.
Yeah, that's awesome. Listen, that's totally cool because, you know, people should. And I'm a big activist for people picking up the phone. It seems like it's less and less of a thing. So that's a good thing. Brian, I can't thank you enough, dude. I hope you have a great day and I'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I had a great time with you, Travis. Thank you, brother.
Peace. Alrighty, there we go. Brian Brignac, everybody. As usual, I'd like to thank Brian for his time. I'd like to publicly thank each and every one of you who continue to listen and support this podcast for your time. I know I say it at the end of almost every episode, but if you want me to start asking some different questions, or if you have a few different topics you'd like me to talk about, please drop me a DM or an email. Don't forget that I offer career consultations that can potentially help your band move forward, or just kind of consolidate your entire music catalog and career to make things a little bit easier in regards to getting gigs or getting auditions, the usual type of stuff. Check out the musicians-mentor.com website for more. Make sure you check out Brian Brignac. Super cool dude. I will see you on the next one. Until then, practice hard, be diligent. Peace.
All right, here we go.
New Phineas and Ferb is here.
We're back, baby.
For 104 more days
I know what we're gonna do today.
of summer vacation.
I am ready for summer shenanigans.
Let's do it. Oh, yeah.
All right! We're gonna bust Phineas and Ferb once and for all!
Are we gonna do this again?
New inventions, shenanigans, innators, adventures, and songs.
Brand new summer vacation.
New Phineas and Ferb starts June 5th on Disney Channel and next day on Disney Plus. On DisneyPlus.Disney.com.